Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
There are many different ways to look at our Torah. Literally adhering to as many rules as possible, which is what the Orthodox people do, or starting at a point from which we can jump off from and find meaning to apply in today's life and world. That is what I do, and that is what we do here at Temple Emet. We find truth in Torah that speaks to us, looking at it sometimes even more Kabbalistically and spiritually to elevate and uplift us and our daily lives for meaning that we can actually relate to, looking to discover what Torah and God is all about. Additionally, we might also take a look and ask ourselves, what in the world does God want from us or expect from us? Or do we even believe in God? Our Torah portion starts with the word Vayikra, which means he called. It's an interesting thing because as we go forth through it, we see things that have nothing to do with that in a sense about an actual calling to us. There is a calling to Moses, but we are meant to abide and listen to the rules. And when we think of the word Vayikra, most of the Torah portions that are in the Torah start and are named by the very first word. So in this one, it's Vayikra. Primarily, we get rules for the many sacrificial offerings, and this is what Heather was singing about, that we were meant to make in the Mishkan. We've been dealing the last 4 or 5 Shabbatot with building the tabernacle and donating to bring our finest things to build the Mishkan. But now that we've built it, we are a people of action and ritual. So now sacrifices are meant to be brought. Sacrifices to be burnt on the altar. We're told sacrifices, meal offerings made of flour and oil, peace offerings, and sacrifices brought for sinning that's done inadvertently, for which we wish to be absolved. As I said, there are many ways to look at the Torah. Obviously, we can no longer make sacrifices at the Holy Temple. However, there are some factions that are trying to rebuild a third temple. If they blow it all up over there, they may have to. So it's incumbent upon us to find meaning in other ways. As it is said, we all have Torah inside of us. Parsha Vayikra in Kabbalah focuses on how we can elevate our consciousness by transforming our ego into light. It means a lot that we take a look, as you can see when we had the issue with the lighting of the candles, that we are always humble and that we are always striving to make that connection to the light, and how we desire to live our lives not by ego, but rather for the purpose of sharing. And that we take a look at how our desire to acquire things for ourselves alone can actually lead us sometimes astray. Rather, as we always say around here, one should always be focused on receiving not for one's own self, but for the purpose of sharing. Then the abundance that we are given can be multiplied even greater, because it's not for selfish, but for more altruistic purposes. And therein lies the root of what we're going to take a look at and glean from for today. Purposes, or rather, purpose. What are we meant to do, or in Torah talk, Vayikra, what are we called to do by God? There is a difference in what we want out of life and what we are meant to have. If we spend our lives and our time wanting, we can come up short and at times very empty. Has anyone ever experienced that? Wanting leaves us in a perpetual state of desire, chaos, and never-ending struggle. Why? Because our wants change constantly and they can leave us unfulfilled. We can't usually get everything that we want, and sometimes what we want isn't even good for us. Sometimes we are so good at making things happen that shouldn't. Has anyone ever done that? We can actually derail our own selves, ending up in relationships or jobs that don't serve us and God's ultimate plan for us. How everything we do in life is actually time well spent because there's lessons that we are meant to learn from. But to give you an example, first, many people, especially in rabbinic Judaism now, are second career rabbis. This is why sometimes so many different people have so many different careers. They may start out doing what they think they want to do, but God has other plans. And instead, it becomes a long journey of twists and turns and sometimes a lot of chaos to get to the point that God intended for them to be, because Vayikra, he called. Now, it's interesting because sometimes we may be on the right path our entire life. It may be when we retire that we actually have the opportunity and the freedom to do what we want or maybe have been called to do. Now, for all of us here, if you want a real life, real time example, I am one of your best examples. I spent years, as many of you know, chasing the dream of being an actress, only to be derailed sometimes by devastating, life altering things every time I got close. It was only after the third time, what do we say about number 3? Making order out of the chaos, that I got what God was finally trying to tell me, calling me toward the path that led me here to each and every one of you here today. It is said that we were all together before, and we are all here today, together again. Kabbalistically, souls find each other. For our parsha here today, to quote Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, Vayikra, or he called. Look carefully at the verse and you will see that its construction is odd. Literally translated, it reads, he called to Moses. And then God spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, ... The first phrase seems to be redundant. If we are told that God spoke to Moses, why say in addition, he called? The answer is that God's call to Moses was something prior to and different from what God then went on to say. The latter were the details. The former was the summons, the mission, not unlike God's first call to Moses at the burning bush, where he invited him to undertake the task that would define his life, leading the people out of exile and slavery to freedom in the promised land. Why the second call? Probably because the book of Vayikra has on the face of it nothing to do with Moses, as I said earlier. The original name given to it by the sages was Torah Chohanim, the law of the priests. And Moses was not a priest. That role belonged to his brother Aaron. It's an interesting thing because as we say later, and you'll hear me, and I do it every time at the Birkat Kohanim, the priestly benediction, we are all meant to be a kingdom of priests, but it starts here. In biblical times, we had priests, and then things evolve. So it was as if God were saying to Moses, this too is a part of your vocation. You are not a priest, but you are the vehicle through which I reveal all of my laws, including those of the priests. The idea that God might invite human beings to actually become his partners and emissaries was revolutionary, yet that is what Judaism is all about. Jewish history began with God's call to Abraham to leave his land and his family, and then God called to Moses, God called to the prophets. And there is a particularly vivid account in Isaiah's mystical vision in which he saw God enthroned and surrounded by singing angels. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And then I said, here am I, Hineni, send me. So what does this mean for us today? God is not calling to us from a burning bush, hey, you over there, but does call to us in different ways. That small voice inside of us that we're trying to connect to in the Shema or in meditation, or when quieting the noise of life, or when doing something that we absolutely love, playing pickleball or golf or swimming or surfing or sailing or gardening or cooking, listening to music, even driving when there's no traffic on the 405 or during COVID times, and taking a moment to just enjoy the breeze, that Ruach Elohim that surrounds us, the Spirit of God, or to look at the sky and enjoy the beautiful clouds and the clear sky on a good day, or the times that we can enjoy with family and with friends, pushing and connecting our bodies to their farthest limit and beyond, or maybe even getting our hair done and not talking to the stylist, or a massage and not talking through it, and instead just breathing, taking a breath. Let's all just take a breath in and out and just let it resolve like we do when we are waiting for notes on the piano. And then remembering sometimes to take a moment for self-care. We must enjoy everything that has been given to us by God, things that we are meant to be grateful for, because yes, God is everywhere. God is around us. God is inside of us. We are said, created B'Tselem Elohim, are we, in the image of God. And God is actually calling to us constantly to be good, to do good, to be a kingdom of priests, and to share the best of us, who we are and what we have been given, with others. Remember, Kabbalistically, as we've said, everything we are given is essentially for the purpose of sharing. Our Parsha dwells on sacrificial offerings, which were meant to elevate us and our lives. However, Kabbalistically, even the sacrifices translate into something else. The salt in the offerings represent balance in life and in work. Fire, representing transformation of the physical into the spiritual. The burnt offering, representing a complete and total surrender to God and of ego. And the meal offering, representing gentle refinement. We are here to take the gifts that we have been given, figure out how best to define and cultivate them always on our journey of life, and then how to share them. The complication that we create for ourselves is actually in that process. It is not being able to identify the difference between what we want for ourselves and who we think we are from what God actually intends for us, what we actually need, the difference between want and need. So whenever we go through life, we have to ask, do I really need this? Or is this something that I want that I don't actually need? Today, we are meant to look at that difference between what we want and what we need, what might be best for us for the purpose of sharing, and actually what we might have to sacrifice sometimes along the way to serve that call from God we are meant to heed. And Kabbalistically, transforming ego into light by looking at the more mystical significance of those sacrifices as actually being tools for the personal refinement and growth we are meant to achieve. The word Vayikra, as it is spelled in Hebrew, especially for those learning Hebrew, taking the Hebrew class, or those who do Mark's Torah study class when it comes up online, the word Vayikra is actually written in the Torah with a very tiny aleph. The small aleph represents humility. Switching things up in different Hebrew forms as found in the word Vayikar with a resh on the end, shifting our lives from random coincidence to Vayikra with the little tiny aleph at the end towards conscious divine calling. The root of the word and the letters all have significant meaning in Hebrew, and Kabbalistically, they have a very important effect on our lives. The small aleph at the end of the word symbolizes and teaches us the need for absolute humility and reducing the ego towards smallness to then create space for the divine light to call us. As we go through the Shabbat and the countdown to Passover, let us take a good look at ourselves. What drives us? What moves us? What motivates us? Are we driven by ego, sometimes anger, frustration, or at times creating chaos for ourselves? Or are we able to be the small olive, connecting to humility, able to hear and then heed God's call? We are all beautiful beings filled with divine light. Our mission is to continually refine ourselves, to adapt to wherever we are in our lives and our journey, to be able to fulfill God's purpose for us, even if it's just being calm and centered enough to recognize someone else in need and to help them. Or maybe to donate skill, time, or money, the gifts that we have been given to share our abundance with all. In so doing, we elevate ourselves, we elevate each other, and we elevate our world by heeding the call. May God recognize this. May God grant us further blessing and abundance for the purpose of sharing. And may we all just get a little closer to the light of divinity and one another. Ken Yiratzon, may it be God's will. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat